When Daniel Hayes walked into the CEO's office that gray morning, he expected to be fired. What he didn't expect was to discover that the technology he abandoned years ago, the same system that could have saved his dying wife, had been secretly bought, perfected, and was now saving lives across the country. The woman sitting across from him knew everything, his failures, his sacrifices, and the devastating truth he wasn't ready to hear. If you want to see how a broken man transforms his deepest regret into purpose, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights in the hallway buzzed like dying insects. Daniel Hayes stood outside the executive floor staring at the brass nameplate that read, AVA Sterling, CEO. His reflection warped and tired in its polished surface. His shirt was wrinkled despite his best efforts that morning, and there was a coffee stain on his sleeve he'd tried unsuccessfully to hide under his jacket. The jacket itself was 2 years old, bought back when things were different, when Sarah was still alive and his life made sense. He checked his phone. 8:47 a.m., 3 minutes until his scheduled execution. Because that's when this was. Everyone knew it. When Ava Sterling summoned you to her office at 9 in the morning, you didn't walk back out employed. The woman had a reputation that preceded her like a winter storm. Brilliant, ruthless, and completely immune to sob stories. She'd taken over Sterling Medical Technologies at 28 after her father's retirement and had immediately gutted the executive team, restructured 3 departments, and doubled the company's market value in 18 months. The business magazines loved her. The employees feared her. Daniel's hands were shaking. He shoved them in his pockets. The thing was, he couldn't even argue with the decision. His performance over the past 6 months had been abysmal. Missed deadlines, incomplete reports. That presentation last month where he'd literally fallen asleep during the VP's questions because he'd been up all night with his son, who'd had another nightmare about his mother not coming home. Daniel had woken up to 15 pairs of eyes staring at him and the VP's voice saying his name with careful, furious politeness. He should have been fired then. The fact that it had taken this long was almost generous. His phone buzzed. A text from his neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who'd agreed to watch his son this morning. Tommy ate his breakfast. He asked when you're coming home. Daniel typed back, soon, thank you. He didn't know if it was true. Tommy was 7 years old and had stopped smiling the day his mother died. It had been 8 months now. 8 months of Daniel trying to be both parents, trying to hold down a job that paid enough to cover the mortgage and the medical bills they were still drowning in, trying to convince his son that the world wasn't just a place where people you loved disappeared without warning. He was failing at all of it. The office door opened. A woman in her 20s, sharply dressed with the kind of confident posture that came from never having doubted herself, gave him a professional smile. Mr. Hayes? Miss Sterling will see you now. Daniel nodded. His throat was too dry to speak. He walked in. The office was nothing like he'd expected. He'd imagined something cold and modern, all glass and steel and minimalist furniture that cost more than his car. Instead, the space was surprisingly warm. There were bookshelves along one wall, filled with actual books, their spines worn from use. A window overlooked the city, rain starting to streak down the glass. The desk was large but not ostentatious, covered in organized stacks of files and what looked like handwritten notes. And behind the desk sat Ava Sterling. She was younger than he'd thought, 30, maybe. Dark hair pulled back in a way that was professional but not severe, and eyes that were currently fixed on him with an intensity that made him want to step backward. She wore a gray suit that probably cost what he made in a month, but there was something about her expression, a tightness around her mouth, a deliberation in how she held herself, that suggested she wasn't comfortable with power, just good at wielding it. Sit down, Mr. Hayes, she said. Her voice was measured, controlled. Daniel sat. The chair was more comfortable than he deserved. Ava didn't say anything for a moment. She just looked at him, and Daniel had the unsettling feeling of being cataloged, assessed, and understood in ways he didn't want to be. Do you know why you're here? She finally asked. Yes, Daniel said. His voice came out hoarse. I know my performance has been terrible, Ava finished. Your performance has been terrible. 6 months ago, you were one of our most reliable developers. Your code was clean, your project management was solid, and you had a reputation for solving problems other people couldn't. Then something changed. Daniel looked down at his hands. My wife died. He hadn't meant to say it so bluntly. The words just came out, flat and factual, like he was reading from a report. I know, Ava said quietly. Sarah Hayes, age 31, sepsis secondary to a streptococcal infection. She was admitted to County General with flu-like symptoms and was dead within 48 hours. Daniel's head snapped up. How do you... I make it my business to know about my employees, Ava said. There was no apology in her tone, but there was something else. Something that might have been understanding if it came from someone less controlled. Especially the ones who are falling apart. The words hit harder than Daniel expected. He felt his chest tighten, that familiar pressure that came before he started losing it. He forced himself to breathe. I have a son, he said. Tommy. He's 7. I'm all he has left, and I'm trying to... I know I've been failing here, but I'm trying to keep everything together, and it's... Stop, Ava said, holding up one hand. I didn't bring you here to listen to you apologize. Daniel closed his mouth. Confusion joined the anxiety churning in his stomach. Ava leaned forward, resting her elbows on the desk. I brought you here because I've been watching you, Daniel. And not just your failures. I've seen you working late when everyone else goes home. I've seen you logging in at 2 a.m. to fix bugs that could have waited until Monday. I've seen you bringing your son to the office on weekends because you can't afford childcare and you're too proud to ask for help. Daniel felt heat rising to his face. I didn't think anyone... I see everything that happens in this building, Ava said, but that's not what we need to talk about. She pulled a file from the stack on her desk and slid it across to him. Do you remember a company called Mediscan Solutions? The name hit him like a physical blow. Daniel stared at the file but didn't touch it. That was 8 years ago. How do you know about Mediscan? Because Sterling Medical Technologies acquired it, Ava said. 3 years ago, quietly. We bought the intellectual property, the patent applications, and all the research data. It cost us $42 million. Daniel's mouth went dry. Mediscan was barely functional when we shut down. We had a proof of concept, but the AI kept throwing false positives, and we couldn't get the pattern recognition stable enough for clinical trials. We ran out of funding, and the team scattered. There was nothing there worth $42 million. You're wrong, Ava said. There was everything there. You just didn't have the resources to finish it. She opened another file, this one containing what looked like technical specifications and clinical trial data. Your team built the foundation for an AI diagnostic system that could detect early-stage infections before they became life-threatening. The pattern recognition algorithms you designed were revolutionary, Daniel. They just needed refinement. We provided that refinement. Daniel's hands were shaking again. He gripped the arms of the chair. What are you saying? I'm saying the system works, Ava said. Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it now, something that sounded like controlled emotion. We completed the development 18 months ago. The clinical trials finished last quarter. The FDA approved it for hospital use 6 weeks ago. It's called the Mediscan Early Warning System, and it's currently deployed in 47 hospitals across 12 states. The room tilted slightly. Daniel tried to process what he was hearing, but his brain felt like it was moving through mud. It detects infections, he said slowly. Bacterial infections specifically, Ava said. Streptococcal, staphylococcal, E. coli, and 14 other categories. It analyzes patient vitals, lab results, and symptom progression in real time and flags high-risk cases an average of 8 hours before conventional diagnosis. The success rate is 93%. 8 hours. Sarah had been in the hospital for 6 hours before they figured out what was wrong with her. By then, the infection had already spread to her bloodstream. The doctors had tried antibiotics, tried everything, but her organs started shutting down one by one. Daniel had held her hand while she died, watching the monitors flatline, listening to Tommy scream in the hallway because the nurses wouldn't let him in the room. 8 hours would have been enough. The technology you created, Ava said, and her voice had gone very quiet now, could have saved your wife's life. Daniel couldn't breathe. The office was suddenly too small, too warm. He stood up abruptly, the chair scraping backward. I can't... Sit down, Ava said. It wasn't a command exactly, but there was steel underneath the words. Daniel sat. He didn't know why he obeyed. Maybe because standing required more energy than he had. Why are you telling me this? He managed to ask. His voice sounded broken even to his own ears. Because you need to know what you built, Ava said, and because I'm offering you a choice. What choice? Ava stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked city. When she spoke again, her back was to him, and her voice had lost some of its careful control. I lost someone too, she said. My younger sister. She was 17. Meningitis, misdiagnosed as flu. By the time they figured it out, it was too late. That was 5 years ago, and it's the reason I pushed to acquire Mediscan. It's the reason I funded the research myself when the board thought it was too risky. It's the reason I care whether this system saves lives or just becomes another piece of abandoned medical technology. She turned back to face him. For the first time since he'd entered the office, Daniel saw something human in her expression. Not pity, but something that looked like shared understanding. The system is deployed, Ava said, but deployment is just the beginning. We need someone who understands not just the technology, but why it matters. Someone who can speak to hospitals, to doctors, to families. Someone who can make them trust it. You want me to sell it? Daniel said flatly. I want you to lead it, Ava corrected. Director of Clinical Integration. You'd work directly with hospital systems to implement the technology, train their staff, and troubleshoot any issues. You'd also have input on future development. There are other diagnostic categories we want to expand into. Daniel laughed. It came out harsh and bitter. I can barely keep my current job. I'm a developer, not a leader. I don't have an MBA or management experience or any of the things you'd need for a role like that. You have something more important, Ava said. You have a reason to care whether it works. That's not qualification. That's trauma. Sometimes they're the same thing. The words hung in the air between them. Daniel wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was wrong, but he couldn't find the energy. What if I say no? He asked. Then you say no, Ava said simply. I'll write you a recommendation letter for your next position. You'll leave here with a severance package and no hard feelings. And if I say yes? Then you step into the hardest job you've ever had, Ava said. The hours will be brutal. The hospitals will fight you on everything because doctors hate being told a computer can do their job better. You'll have to travel, which means time away from your son. You'll face technical failures and budget fights and moments where you'll want to quit. And through all of it, you'll be working with technology that represents everything you lost. She walked back to the desk and placed both hands on its surface, leaning forward to look him directly in the eyes. But you'll also save lives, she said. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands, if we do this right. You'll take the worst thing that ever happened to you and turn it into something that means other families don't have to suffer the same loss. That's not healing, Daniel, but it might be purpose. Daniel's throat felt tight. He thought about Tommy, about the way his son flinched every time someone mentioned his mother. He thought about Sarah, about the last thing she'd said to him before the sedatives kicked in. Take care of our boy. He thought about the AI system he'd abandoned 8 years ago because the funding dried up, and he needed a stable job. He'd moved on, gotten married, had a son, built a life. And all that time, the technology had been sitting there waiting to be finished, waiting to save people. It hadn't saved Sarah, but it could save someone else's Sarah. I don't know if I can do this, Daniel said quietly. Neither do I, Ava admitted, but I think you're the only person who can. Silence stretched between them. Outside, the rain had gotten heavier, drumming against the window in steady rhythm. Daniel watched the water streak down the glass and thought about all the ways his life had fallen apart in the past 8 months, all the ways he'd failed his son, his job, himself. Maybe it was time to try failing at something that mattered. I need to talk to my son, he said finally. I can't make this decision without thinking about what it means for him. Ava nodded. Take the weekend. I need an answer by Monday. Daniel stood up. His legs felt shaky, but they held. Can I ask you something? Why me? You could hire someone with actual leadership experience. Someone who isn't drowning in grief and barely functional. Ava's expression softened slightly. Because people don't trust technology, Daniel. They trust stories. And you have a story that matters. When you walk into a hospital and tell them this system could have saved your wife, they'll listen. Not because you have credentials, but because you paid the price for those credentials in a way no MBA ever could. She paused, then added more quietly, "And because I think you need this as much as the project needs you." Daniel didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and turned toward the door. "Daniel," Ava called out as he reached for the handle. He looked back. "I know what it's like to carry that weight," she said. "The guilt that you didn't save them. The anger at a world that let them die. The feeling that if you'd just been smarter or faster or better, things would be different." Her eyes held his. "That weight doesn't go away, but you can choose what you do with it. You can let it crush you, or you can use it to build something." Daniel swallowed hard and walked out of the office. The rain had turned into a downpour by the time he made it to his car. He sat in the driver's seat, not starting the engine, just staring at the water sluicing down the windshield. His phone buzzed with another text from Mrs. Chen. "Tommy wants to know if you're okay." Daniel stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed back, "Tell him I'm coming home, and tell him we need to talk about something important." He started the car and pulled out of the parking lot, the wipers struggling to keep up with the rain. As he drove, his mind kept circling back to Ava's words. "You can let it crush you, or you can use it to build something." Sarah used to say something similar, back when they were both working insane hours at Mediscan, and wondering if they were wasting their lives on a project that might never work. She'd grab his hand late at night when they were the last ones left in the office and say, "We're not doing this because it's easy. We're doing it because it matters." He'd believed her then. Maybe he could believe it again. When Daniel pulled into his driveway, Mrs. Chen was waiting on the porch with Tommy. His son wore his dinosaur pajamas despite it being almost noon, and his dark hair stuck up in the same stubborn cowlick that Sarah used to smooth down every morning. When he saw Daniel get out of the car, Tommy's face lit up in a way it rarely did anymore. "Dad!" He ran down the steps and crashed into Daniel's legs, hugging him hard. Daniel knelt down and wrapped his arms around his son, feeling the small, solid weight of him. Tommy smelled like maple syrup and the strawberry shampoo they'd bought because it was Sarah's favorite. "Hey, buddy," Daniel said, his voice rough. "You have a good morning?" "Mrs. Chen let me watch cartoons," Tommy said. Then, more quietly, "I was scared you weren't coming back." The words cut deep. Daniel pulled back to look at his son's face, seeing the fear there that never quite went away. "I'll always come back," Daniel said firmly. "Always. You understand?" Tommy nodded, but Daniel could see he didn't quite believe it. How could he, when his mother had promised the same thing and then died in a hospital bed? Mrs. Chen came down the steps, her face kind and weathered. "He was very good. We made pancakes." "Thank you," Daniel said, standing up. "I'm sorry I was gone longer than I thought." "No apologies needed," Mrs. Chen said, waving him off. "You take care of your boy. That's what matters." After she left, Daniel brought Tommy inside and they sat together on the couch that still smelled faintly of Sarah's perfume even after 8 months. Tommy curled up against his side and Daniel put his arm around him. "I need to tell you something," Daniel said. "Something important." Tommy looked up at him with serious brown eyes. "Are you sick?" "No, buddy. I'm fine." Daniel took a breath. "But I might have a new job. It's a big job, and it would mean I'd have to travel sometimes. I'd be gone for a few days at a time." Tommy's face crumpled. "You're leaving." "Not leaving," Daniel said quickly, pulling him closer. "Never leaving, but I'd have to go away for work sometimes, and I know that's scary. But here's the thing, this job, it's about the thing Mom and I used to work on together. Before you were born, we were trying to build something that could help sick people get better faster." "Like Mom?" Tommy asked quietly. Daniel's chest tightened. "Yeah, like Mom. We didn't finish it back then, but other people did, and now it's helping people. And they want me to help make sure it helps as many people as possible." "Would it have helped, Mom?" The question was so direct, so heartbreakingly simple, that Daniel had to close his eyes for a moment. "Yes," he said honestly. "If we'd finished it sooner, it probably would have." Tommy was quiet for a long time, his small hand gripping Daniel's shirt. "Then you should do it," he finally said. "So other kids don't have to be sad like me." Daniel felt something break open in his chest. He pulled his son close and held on tight, trying not to fall apart completely. "You're the bravest person I know," he whispered into Tommy's hair. "I'm not brave," Tommy said, his voice muffled against Daniel's chest. "I'm scared all the time." Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the hard thing even when you're scared. Tommy pulled back to look at him. Is that what you're doing? The hard thing? Yeah, Daniel said. Yeah, I think it is. That weekend, Daniel didn't sleep much. He spent Saturday going through old files from his Mediscan days, remembering the late nights and the breakthrough moments and the crushing disappointment when they'd run out of money. He found photos of Sarah standing in front of a whiteboard covered in algorithm diagrams, her smile bright and confident. She'd believed in the project more than anyone. On Sunday, he took Tommy to the park. They threw a football around, and for a few hours things felt almost normal. Almost like they were a regular father and son doing regular things, not two people trying to reassemble a life that had shattered. When Tommy asked if they could get ice cream, Daniel said yes, even though it was too close to dinner. They sat on a bench eating their cones, and Tommy got chocolate all over his face, and Daniel thought about Ava's words. You can let it crush you, or you can use it to build something. Monday morning, Daniel walked back into Sterling Medical Technologies at 8:45. He was wearing the same wrinkled suit, but he'd made an effort to shave and comb his hair. When he reached Ava's office, her assistant waved him in immediately. Ava looked up from her desk. She'd been writing something by hand, and she set down her pen carefully. You're early, she observed. I wanted to say yes before I talked myself out of it, Daniel said. Something that might have been relief crossed Ava's face. You're sure? No, Daniel admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. Ava stood up and extended her hand. Then welcome to the team, Director Hayes. Daniel shook her hand, feeling the firmness of her grip. I'm going to fail, he said, probably multiple times. Definitely multiple times, Ava agreed. But you're also going to succeed, and when you do, you're going to save lives that otherwise would have been lost. She released his hand and pulled out a thick folder. This is everything you need to know about current deployments, hospital contacts, and technical specifications. I've also assigned you an assistant, Marcus Chen. He's in Office 412. Smart kid, good with logistics. You'll need him because the first hospital visit is scheduled for Thursday. Thursday? Daniel felt panic spike. That's 3 days from now. Welcome to the job, Ava said with the faintest hint of a smile. You wanted purpose. Here it is. As Daniel left the office, with the folder tucked under his arm, his phone buzzed. A text from Tommy. Good luck at work, Dad. Love you. Daniel typed back, Love you too, buddy. See you tonight. He walked down the hallway toward his new office, his new life, his new purpose. The folder felt heavy in his hands, weighted with responsibility and possibility and the ghosts of everything he'd lost. But for the first time in 8 months, Daniel felt something other than grief. He felt ready to fight. The office Marcus Chen occupied was barely larger than a closet, crammed with filing cabinets and a desk that looked like it had survived a small explosion of paperwork. Marcus himself was 26, wearing glasses that kept sliding down his nose and a nervous energy that made him seem like he'd mainlined espresso for breakfast. Director Hayes, he said, standing up so fast he knocked over a coffee mug. It was empty, thankfully. I've been expecting you. Ms. Sterling said you'd be taking over clinical integration, and I have to say, I've been following your work since the Mediscan days. That pattern recognition algorithm you developed was absolutely groundbreaking, even if the implementation had some stability issues, but that was really more of a resource problem than a fundamental design flaw. And honestly, Marcus, Daniel interrupted gently. Breathe. Marcus took a breath. Right, sorry. I get excited about this stuff. Anyway, I pulled together everything for the Riverside Memorial visit on Thursday. Their chief of medicine is Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, and she's apparently skeptical about AI diagnostics, so that should be fun. Also, their IT infrastructure is from approximately the Stone Age, which means integration is going to be a nightmare. Daniel set down the folder Ava had given him and rubbed his temples. 3 days to prepare for a hospital visit with a skeptical doctor and outdated technology. Perfect. Walk me through what we're actually doing there, Daniel said, pulling up a chair. Marcus grabbed a tablet and started swiping through documents. Okay, so Riverside Memorial is a mid-sized hospital, about 300 beds, serving a primarily low-income community. They've got high rates of emergency admissions and a chronic shortage of specialists. They're one of the pilot sites for Mediscan because Ms. Sterling specifically wanted to prove the system works in resource-limited environments, not just fancy university hospitals. Makes sense, Daniel said. If it only works where they already have everything, it's not really solving the problem. Exactly. Marcus pushed his glasses up. But here's the issue. Dr. Okonkwo has been practicing medicine for 30 years. She's old school, and she's publicly stated that she doesn't trust algorithms to do a doctor's job. The hospital board approved the pilot program over her objections, so she's not exactly welcoming us with open arms. Daniel felt a familiar knot forming in his stomach. So we're walking into hostile territory. Pretty much. But the system's already installed. IT finished the integration last week. We just need to train the staff and get buy-in from the medical team. Marcus hesitated. Ms. Sterling said you'd be able to handle the human element, that you have a way of making people understand why this matters. Daniel thought about Ava's words in her office, about having a story that mattered. The weight of it settled on his shoulders like a physical thing. What do you know about the technical side? Daniel asked. If their IT infrastructure is outdated, how stable is the integration? Marcus launched into an explanation involving server architecture and data pipelines that made Daniel's head spin. He'd been a developer once, but that felt like a lifetime ago. Still, he forced himself to pay attention, to ask questions, to understand the system he was now responsible for selling to skeptical doctors. They worked through lunch, Marcus ordering sandwiches that arrived cold and slightly soggy. Daniel barely tasted his. By the time the afternoon light started fading, he had pages of notes and a growing sense of how unprepared he was for Thursday. One more thing, Marcus said as Daniel was getting ready to leave. Ms. Sterling wants weekly updates, direct to her. She's very hands-on with this project. I noticed, Daniel said dryly. Marcus grinned. She's intense, but she cares. Like genuinely cares whether this works. I've been here 2 years, and I've never seen her invest this much personal attention in anything. Daniel thought about Ava's sister, dead at 17 from a misdiagnosis. Yeah, he understood personal investment. That night, Daniel picked up Tommy from Mrs. Chen's house and took him home. They made spaghetti together, Tommy standing on a stool to help stir the sauce, and for a little while it felt almost normal. But when bedtime came, Tommy clung to him harder than usual. You're not leaving yet, right? Tommy asked, his voice small. Not until Thursday, Daniel said, tucking the blankets around him. And I'll only be gone one night. Mrs. Chen will stay with you. What if something happens? Daniel sat on the edge of the bed. Like what? Like with Mom, Tommy whispered. She went to work and then she got sick and then she didn't come home. The words gutted him. Daniel took a slow breath, trying to find the right response, knowing there wasn't one that would actually make the fear go away. I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen, he said quietly. But I can promise I'll always do everything I can to come home to you. And if something does happen, Mrs. Chen has all the phone numbers, and there are a lot of people who will take care of you. You're not alone, buddy. You'll never be alone. Tommy's eyes were wet. I don't want other people. I want you. I know. Daniel pulled him into a hug. I know. He stayed until Tommy fell asleep, then sat in the living room with a glass of water he didn't drink, staring at the photos on the wall. Sarah smiled at him from their wedding day, from Tommy's birth, from a random Sunday morning when she'd been making pancakes and he'd caught her mid-laugh. She looked so alive in those photos, so present. It was hard to believe she was gone. His phone buzzed. A text from Ava. Talked to Dr. Okonkwo today. She's expecting you Thursday at 9 a.m. Fair warning, she's tougher than she sounds on paper. Don't try to oversell. She'll see right through it. Daniel typed back. What should I do instead? The response came quickly. Tell her the truth. It's your best weapon. Wednesday was a blur of preparation. Marcus had put together a presentation, but Daniel scrapped half of it. Too technical, too impersonal. He rebuilt it around stories instead. Case studies from the pilot hospitals where Mediscan had flagged infections early. A 10-year-old in Phoenix who would have died from sepsis if the system hadn't caught the infection 8 hours before the attending physician. A mother of 3 in Seattle who walked out of the hospital alive instead of in a body bag. He didn't include Sarah's story. Not yet. He wasn't ready to make her death into a data point. That evening, he practiced the presentation in front of Tommy, who sat on the couch eating apple slices and watching with serious concentration. What do you think? Daniel asked when he finished. It's sad, Tommy said, but good sad. Like, sad that people got sick, but good that the computer helped them. Yeah, Daniel said, that's exactly right. Thursday morning came too fast. Daniel dropped Tommy off at Mrs. Chen's house at 7, hugging his son tight and promising again that he'd be back tomorrow. Tommy was brave about it, but Daniel saw the fear in his eyes. The drive to Riverside Memorial took an hour through morning traffic. Marcus met him in the parking lot, looking nervous and carrying a laptop bag that seemed to weigh more than he did. "Ready?" Marcus asked. "No," Daniel said honestly. "Let's go anyway." The hospital was older than Daniel expected, the kind of building that had been added onto over decades until it became a maze of mismatched wings and confusing hallways. They found their way to the administrative offices, where a tired-looking receptionist directed them to a conference room. Dr. Patricia Okonkwo was already waiting. She was a tall woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun and an expression that suggested she'd already decided this meeting was a waste of her time. She wore scrubs instead of a white coat, and there was a stethoscope draped around her neck like she'd been pulled directly from patient care. "Dr. Okonkwo," Daniel said, extending his hand. "I'm Daniel Hayes, and this is Marcus Chen. Thank you for meeting with us." She shook his hand with a grip that was firm to the point of aggressive. "Let's be clear about something, Mr. Hayes. I didn't agree to this meeting. The hospital board forced this system on us, and they're forcing me to play nice with the people selling it. So let's skip the pleasantries and get to the part where you tell me why I should trust a computer algorithm over 30 years of clinical experience." Marcus made a small squeaking sound. Daniel resisted the urge to do the same. "Fair enough," Daniel said, sitting down across from her. "Can I ask you a question first?" Dr. Okonkwo raised an eyebrow. "That's not how presentations usually work." "This isn't a usual presentation." Daniel leaned forward. "In 30 years of practice, how many patients have you lost to infections that were caught too late?" Something flickered across her face. "Too many." "How many of those do you think could have been saved if the infection had been identified even a few hours earlier?" "Some of them," she admitted grudgingly. "Maybe half. But that's not a failure of clinical judgment, Mr. Hayes. That's a failure of resources. We're understaffed, overworked, and dealing with patients who often come in after they've been sick for days because they can't afford to miss work or don't have insurance. By the time they get here, they're already critical." "I know," Daniel said, "and Mediscan doesn't solve those problems. It doesn't give you more staff or better insurance coverage or any of the systemic issues that make your job impossible. What it does is buy you time." He opened the laptop and pulled up the first case study. Not a slide deck, just a simple document with a photo of a little girl smiling at the camera. "This is Emma Rodriguez," Daniel said. "Age 8. She came into Phoenix General with a fever and joint pain. The attending physician suspected flu, ordered standard tests, and admitted her for observation. 6 hours later, Mediscan flagged her chart. Pattern recognition suggested early-stage streptococcal infection with high risk of progression to septic shock. The physician ordered additional tests based on that flag, confirmed the diagnosis, and started aggressive antibiotic treatment. Emma went home 3 days later. Odds that dead. He pulled up another photo. Without the early flag, the statistical models suggest Emma would have been diagnosed an average of 10 hours later. At that point, her chances of survival dropped to 63%. Dr. Okonkwo studied the photo. One case doesn't prove efficacy. You're right. Daniel pulled up another file. This is Michael Chen, age 47, diabetic, came in with abdominal pain. Mediscan flagged potential E. coli infection before lab results came back. Early treatment prevented kidney failure. Another file. Jennifer Washington, age 22, postpartum. System caught early endometritis. She kept her fertility. Another. Carlos Martinez, age 65, caught pneumonia before it became sepsis. He kept going, pulling up case after case, not in a slick presentation, but just as simple photos and brief summaries. People who were alive because the system had bought their doctors a few extra hours. Dr. Okonkwo's expression had shifted from hostile to thoughtful. How many false positives? 7%, Marcus said quietly. The system flags patients who turn out to be false alarms 7 times out of every 100 alerts. That's not terrible, Dr. Okonkwo admitted, but it's also not zero. Every false positive means unnecessary tests, unnecessary antibiotics, unnecessary stress on patients and staff. You're absolutely right, Daniel said, and that's why we're here. Not to tell you the system is perfect, but to work with you to make it better. The algorithm learns from every case. When you identify false positives, that data feeds back into the pattern recognition and improves accuracy. You're not just using the system, Dr. Okonkwo. You're teaching it. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. Why you? Excuse me? Why are you the one doing this presentation? You're not a doctor. I looked you up. You're a software developer who worked on the original project 8 years ago and then disappeared into a regular corporate job. Now suddenly you're director of clinical integration. So why you? Daniel felt the question like a punch to the sternum. Marcus looked at him nervously, clearly wondering if he should intervene. Because my wife died from sepsis 8 months ago, Daniel said. The words came out flat, factual. She had flu-like symptoms, went to the hospital, and was dead within 48 hours. Streptococcal infection, misdiagnosed until it was too late. She was 31 years old. Dr. Okonkwo's expression shifted. I built the foundation for this system, Daniel continued. Then I ran out of money and moved on with my life. Other people finished it, and now it works. And if it had existed when Sarah got sick, she'd probably still be alive. His voice cracked slightly on his wife's name, but he pushed through. So yeah, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a guy who lost everything because the technology didn't exist yet, and I'm trying to make sure other people don't have to lose what I lost. The room was very quiet. Dr. Okonkwo studied him for a long moment. Then she stood up. Come with me. She led them out of the conference room through a labyrinth of hallways and into the emergency department. It was controlled chaos. Nurses moving between beds, monitors beeping, a child crying somewhere in the background. Dr. Okonkwo stopped at a nurse's station where a young woman with tired eyes was charting. This is Nurse Sullivan, Dr. Okonkwo said. She's been working with the Mediscan interface since it was installed. Tell them what you told me. Nurse Sullivan looked up, clearly surprised to be put on the spot. The system flagged a patient yesterday. 40-year-old male came in with chest pain. We were thinking cardiac event, but Mediscan suggested possible bacterial pericarditis. Dr. Chen ordered an echo based on that. And sure enough, the patient had fluid around his heart from an infection. We caught it early. Would you have caught it without the system? Dr. Okonkwo asked. Nurse Sullivan hesitated. Eventually, but probably not until he started decompensating. It wasn't obvious from the presentation. Dr. Okonkwo turned back to Daniel. The system works. I'm not arguing that. What I'm arguing is whether it's worth the disruption. Every new technology comes with learning curves, integration headaches, and staff resistance. I need to know that you people are going to stick around when things get messy. We will, Daniel said. That's literally my job. When the system throws errors or the staff has questions or something doesn't work right, you call me. Marcus and I will be your direct contacts, and we'll be here as often as you need us. What about when you get pulled to the next hospital? Then we'll be working both, Daniel said. Look, I'm not going to lie to you. This is going to be hard. The technology isn't perfect. The integration is going to have issues, and there will be days when you'll want to throw the whole system in the trash. But it saves lives, Dr. Okonkwo. You know it does. So we're going to figure it out together. Dr. Okonkwo studied him for another long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. It was small and slightly skeptical, but it was there. All right, Mr. Hayes, you've got 3 months to prove this thing is worth the headache. If it works, I'll champion it. If it doesn't, I'm going to personally make sure every hospital board in the state knows it failed. That's fair, Daniel said, extending his hand again. This time when she shook it, there was less hostility in her grip. The rest of the day was spent in technical training sessions with the hospital staff. Marcus handled most of the software interface demonstration while Daniel answered questions about clinical applications. By the time they finished at 6 in the evening, Daniel's brain felt like mush and his voice was hoarse from talking. They grabbed dinner at a diner across from the hospital, Marcus ordering pancakes for dinner because apparently that was his thing. That went better than I expected, Marcus said, drowning his pancakes in syrup. I thought she was going to eat us alive. She still might, Daniel said, picking at his burger. 3 months isn't a lot of time to prove value. Yeah, but at least she's giving us a chance. Marcus took a bite and chewed thoughtfully. Can I ask you something? That story about your wife, was that true? Yeah, Daniel said quietly. Every word. I'm sorry, Marcus said. I can't even imagine. Don't try to, Daniel advised. It doesn't help. They ate in silence for a while. Then Marcus asked, "Is that why Ms. Sterling hired you, because of what happened?" "Partly," Daniel admitted. "She thinks I can connect with people in a way that makes them trust the technology. Turn my tragedy into something useful." He laughed without humor. "Feels pretty manipulative when you say it out loud." "I don't think it's manipulative," Marcus said seriously. "I think it's honest. People trust stories more than statistics, and your story matters." Daniel thought about Sarah, about the way she'd believed in the Mediscan project even when it seemed impossible. She would have liked Marcus, he thought. She would have appreciated his earnest enthusiasm. His phone rang. Mrs. Chen's number. Daniel answered immediately, his heart jumping. "Is Tommy okay?" "He's fine," Mrs. Chen said quickly. "He just wanted to say goodnight. He was worried you forgot." Relief and guilt washed over him in equal measure. "Put him on." There was rustling, then Tommy's voice. "Dad?" "Hey, buddy," Daniel said, his throat tight. "How was your day?" "Okay, Mrs. Chen made dumplings. They were good, but not as good as Mom's." Nothing would ever be as good as Mom's. Sarah had learned to make dumplings from her grandmother, and she'd spent hours getting them perfect, the folds just right. "I'm glad you had something good for dinner," Daniel said. "I'm eating a burger at a diner. It's pretty mediocre." Tommy giggled. "Mediocre is a funny word." "It is," Daniel agreed, smiling despite everything. "Listen, I'll be home tomorrow afternoon. We can do whatever you want when I get back, okay? Can we go to the bookstore?" "Absolutely. We'll get you something new to read." "Love you, Dad." "Love you too, kiddo. Sweet dreams." After they hung up, Daniel sat for a moment with the phone in his hand, feeling the distance between him and his son like a physical ache. "You okay?" Marcus asked. "Yeah," Daniel lied. "Just tired." They drove back to the hotel in Marcus's car, a beat-up Honda that made concerning noises whenever it went over 30 miles per hour. The hotel was a budget chain off the highway, clean but depressing in the way that all temporary places were. Daniel lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. He kept replaying the day in his mind. Dr. Okonkwo's skepticism, Nurse Sullivan's cautious optimism, the case files he'd shown of people who were alive because of technology he'd helped create. It should have felt good. It should have felt like progress. Instead, he just felt hollow. His phone buzzed, a text from Ava. "How did it go?" Daniel stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Better than expected. Dr. Okonkwo is willing to give us 3 months." "That's a win." "Is it?" There was a longer pause before Ava's response came through. "I know what you're feeling, like you're using Sarah's death as a sales pitch, like you're cheapening what happened by turning it into something productive." Daniel's hands tightened on the phone. How did she know exactly what he was thinking? "You're not," Ava continued. "You're giving her death meaning. There's a difference. It doesn't make the grief easier, but it makes it bearable." Daniel typed, "Does it get easier? The grief?" "No, but you get stronger at carrying it." He didn't know what to say to that, so he just typed, "Thank you. Get some sleep. You have a long drive tomorrow." But sleep didn't come. Daniel lay there in the dark, thinking about Sarah and Tommy and the system that could have saved one but might save thousands. He thought about Dr. Okonkwo's challenge, about proving value in 3 months, about all the ways this could still fail. Eventually, he got up and opened his laptop. He started drafting a plan. Weekly check-ins with Riverside Memorial, data collection protocols, staff feedback mechanisms. If he had 3 months to prove the system worked, he was going to use every minute of it. By the time the sun came up, Daniel had filled 6 pages with notes, and his eyes felt like sandpaper. But he also had something that felt like a direction. Marcus knocked on his door at 7, looking unnervingly awake. "Ready to head back?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Daniel said, grabbing his bag. The drive home was quieter. Marcus seemed to sense Daniel's mood and didn't push conversation. When they hit traffic outside the city, Daniel found himself thinking about the presentation he'd given, about the photos of people who were alive because of those crucial extra hours. Emma Rodriguez smiling at the camera, Michael Chen back at work, Jennifer Washington holding her newborn, and Sarah, who never got those hours. His phone rang again. This time, it was an unknown number. "This is Daniel Hayes," he answered. "Mr. Hayes, this is Dr. Catherine Ross from St. Vincent's Hospital. I got your contact information from Ava Sterling. I understand you're working on the Mediscan implementation program. Daniel sat up straighter. That's right. We're considering joining the pilot program. I'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss integration requirements. Of course, Daniel said, his mind already racing. When works for you? They scheduled a call for Monday. After hanging up, Daniel stared at his phone in disbelief. What was that? Marcus asked. Another hospital, Daniel said. They want to talk about Mediscan. Marcus grinned. See, word's getting out. This is going to work, Daniel. Daniel wanted to believe him. He really did. They made it back to the city by 2 p.m. Daniel drove straight to Mrs. Chen's house, and when Tommy came running out to meet him, Daniel swept him up in a hug that lasted longer than it probably needed to. You came back, Tommy said. I told you I would, Daniel replied. That evening, they went to the bookstore like Daniel had promised. Tommy picked out 3 books about dinosaurs, and Daniel bought them all without hesitation. They got ice cream afterward, even though it was getting cold outside, sitting on a bench and watching people walk by. Dad? Tommy asked, chocolate ice cream smeared on his chin. Yeah, buddy. Are you happy with your new job? The question caught Daniel off guard. He thought about it carefully before answering. I don't know if happy is the right word, he said honestly, but I think it's important, and sometimes important is better than happy. Tommy considered this seriously. Mom used to say that doing good things is more important than doing easy things. Daniel's chest tightened. She was right about that. I think she'd be proud of you, Tommy said quietly. Daniel had to look away, blinking hard. I hope so. They walked home at the gathering dusk, Tommy's small hand in his, and Daniel thought about all the impossible things he was trying to do. Be a good father, build a program that would save lives, carry grief without letting it crush him, turn loss into purpose. It felt too big, too heavy. But Tommy trusted him, and Ava was counting on him. And somewhere out there, people who didn't know his name were alive because of technology he'd helped create. Maybe that was enough. Maybe it had to be. Monday morning arrived too fast. Daniel had spent the weekend trying to be present with Tommy, while his mind kept spinning through implementation protocols and hospital integration challenges. They'd built a blanket fort in the living room on Saturday, and Daniel had read dinosaur books until his voice went hoarse. But even then, part of his brain was cataloging everything that could go wrong with the Riverside Memorial deployment. The call with Dr. Catherine Ross from St. Vincent's was scheduled for 10. Daniel sat in his office at 9:45, staring at his notes and feeling completely unprepared. Marcus stuck his head in the door. You ready for this? Marcus asked. Not even a little bit, Daniel admitted. Good. Means you're taking it seriously. Marcus handed him a file folder. I pulled together some specs on St. Vincent's. They're bigger than Riverside, about 600 beds, level 1 trauma center. Their patient volume is insane, which means more opportunities to prove efficacy, but also more room for things to break. Daniel flipped through the folder, absorbing information about patient demographics and existing IT infrastructure. His phone rang at exactly 10 o'clock. Dr. Ross, Daniel said, putting the call on speaker so Marcus could hear. Thank you for reaching out. Mr. Hayes, her voice was crisp, professional. I'll be direct. I've been hearing things about your system from colleagues at other hospitals. Some good, some concerning. I need to understand what we'd actually be getting into. What are the concerns? Daniel asked. Integration complexity, staff training requirements, and frankly whether the accuracy rates justify the resource investment. I've seen AI diagnostic tools before. Most of them promise revolution and deliver marginal improvement at best. Daniel appreciated the honesty. You're right to be skeptical. Can I ask what your current infection mortality rate looks like? There was a pause. Approximately 8% for severe bacterial infections admitted through emergency. And how many of those do you think are caught late? Too many, Dr. Ross said, and there was something in her voice that suggested this was personal. We're a trauma center. We see gunshot wounds, car accidents, massive injuries. Sometimes infections get missed in the chaos because we're focused on keeping someone from bleeding out. That's exactly the scenario where Mediscan works best, Daniel said. The system monitors continuously. It doesn't get distracted by the obvious trauma. It catches the sepsis developing in the background while your team is focused on the immediate crisis. That sounds almost too good to be true. It's not perfect, Daniel said honestly. 7% false positive rate. The system will flag patients who turn out fine, but the alternative is missing the ones who won't be fine until it's too late. Dr. Ross was quiet for a moment. What's your implementation timeline? Marcus jumped in. Typically 6 to 8 weeks from contract signing to full deployment, 2 weeks for IT integration, 2 weeks for system testing, then phased rollout with staff training. And support after deployment? Direct access to our team, Daniel said. I'm not going to hand you a system and disappear. When issues come up, and they will, you'll have someone who actually answers the phone. I'm going to need references, Dr. Ross said. Hospitals where this is already working. I can give you 3, Daniel offered, including Dr. Patricia Okonkwo at Riverside Memorial. She was skeptical too. Still is, actually, but she's willing to admit the system has value. Patricia Okonkwo? Dr. Ross sounded surprised. I know her. If she's vouching for this, that actually means something. They talked for another 20 minutes, working through technical specifications and cost structures. By the end of the call, Dr. Ross had agreed to visit Riverside Memorial the following week to see the system in action. After hanging up, Daniel leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. That went well, Marcus said. She's going to expect perfection when she visits Riverside, Daniel said, which means we need to make sure everything is actually working perfectly. No pressure or anything. Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Okonkwo. System flagged another case this morning. Possible meningitis in a college student. We're running tests now. We'll update you. He showed the message to Marcus. See? This is either going to prove we're right or blow up in our faces. Optimism. I like it. The next 3 weeks were brutal. Daniel split his time between Riverside Memorial and Sterling Medical Technologies, troubleshooting integration issues and fielding calls from increasingly interested hospitals. The system at Riverside had its share of problems. The interface crashed twice, throwing error messages that sent the IT staff into panic mode. One of the false positives involved a hospital board member's wife, which led to an uncomfortable conversation about unnecessary testing. But it also worked. The college student Dr. Okonkwo had texted about did have early-stage meningitis. Treatment started 12 hours earlier than conventional diagnosis would have allowed, and the student made a full recovery. A 56-year-old construction worker came in with what looked like a heart attack, and Mediscan flagged it as bacterial endocarditis. He needed valve replacement surgery, but he survived. Daniel started keeping a list. Every case where the system made a difference, he documented it. Names, ages, outcomes. It felt important to remember that these weren't just statistics. They were people with families who didn't have to plan funerals. Tommy was handling the increased travel better than Daniel had expected, though there were hard nights. One Thursday evening, Daniel came home to find his son sitting in the dark living room, clutching the stuffed elephant Sarah had given him for his 5th birthday. Hey, buddy, Daniel said softly, sitting down next to him. What's going on? I forgot what Mom's voice sounded like, Tommy whispered. The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through old videos until he found one from Tommy's 6th birthday. Sarah's voice filled the room, singing off-key, laughing as Tommy blew out the candles. They watched it 3 times in a row, Tommy curled against Daniel's side, both of them crying quietly. I don't want to forget her, Tommy said. You won't, Daniel promised, even though he knew memory was unreliable and time was cruel. We'll keep remembering together. The visit from Dr. Ross happened on a Wednesday. Daniel met her at Riverside Memorial, along with Dr. Okonkwo and 2 of St. Vincent's senior staff members. They spent 4 hours going through case files, watching the system in action, and interviewing nurses about the practical realities of working with Mediscan. Dr. Okonkwo was surprisingly generous in her assessment. It's not perfect, she told Dr. Ross bluntly. The interface is clunky, the false positives are annoying, and my staff complained for the first 2 weeks. But it works. We've caught 6 cases in 3 weeks that would have been diagnosed significantly later. That's 6 patients who got better outcomes. What about the learning curve? One of the St. Vincent's staff asked. Steep, Dr. Okonkwo admitted, but manageable if you have good support. Hayes and his team have been responsive. When we had issues, they actually showed up. After the tour, Dr. Ross pulled Daniel aside. I'm going to recommend we move forward with a pilot program. But I want you to understand something. St. Vincent's is going to be harder than Riverside. We're bigger, we're busier, and our staff has less patience for technology that doesn't immediately prove its value. I understand, Daniel said. I hope you do, Dr. Ross said. Because if this fails, it's not just your system that takes the hit, it's my credibility for bringing it in. The weight of that responsibility settled on Daniel's shoulders like another physical burden to carry. St. Vincent signed the contract 2 weeks later. Marcus immediately dove into the technical planning, mapping out server requirements and data integration protocols. Daniel focused on the human side, scheduling meetings with department heads and planning training sessions. But it was Ava who called him into her office on a Friday afternoon with news that changed everything. "We have a problem," she said without preamble. Daniel's stomach dropped. What kind of problem? The kind that could destroy this entire program. Ava pulled up an email on her computer and turned the screen toward him. This came from Jonathan Price. He's a physician at Memorial West, one of our pilot hospitals. He's threatening to go public with concerns about Metascan's accuracy. Daniel scanned the email. The words jumped out at him. Serious questions about reliability, potential patient harm. Ethical concerns about AI replacing clinical judgment. How bad is this? Daniel asked. Bad enough that if he goes to the media, every hospital considering Metascan will pull out, Ava said. Bad enough that the hospitals already using it might demand we remove the system. What happened? What case is he talking about? Ava pulled up another file. 2 weeks ago, Metascan flagged a patient for possible bacterial meningitis. Dr. Price ordered aggressive treatment based on that flag, including a spinal tap and high-dose antibiotics. Turns out the patient had viral meningitis, not bacterial. The treatment was unnecessary and caused complications. Daniel felt sick. That's within the 7% false positive rate. We told them that would happen. I know, Ava said. But Dr. Price is arguing that the system's confidence level was too high. That it should have flagged the case as uncertain rather than probable bacterial infection. He's saying we oversold the accuracy. Did we? Ava's expression was hard to read. The algorithm gave an 82% probability of bacterial infection. The patient presented with classic symptoms. By conventional standards, that's enough to justify aggressive treatment, but the virus strain mimicked bacterial markers in a way the system hadn't encountered before. So the system made a mistake. The system made a prediction based on available data, Ava corrected. Dr. Price made the treatment decision, but he's looking for someone to blame, and we're the convenient target. Daniel rubbed his face. What do we do? You talk to him, Ava said. In person? Find out what it would take to resolve this before he goes public. Why me? Because you're better at this than I am, Ava said simply. I built the technology. You make people trust it, so go make Dr. Price trust that we're not the enemy. Memorial West was a 3-hour drive. Daniel made the trip alone, Marcus staying behind to handle the St. Vincent's integration. The hospital was newer than Riverside, sleeker, with the kind of modern architecture that probably looked great in promotional materials but felt cold and impersonal in reality. Dr. Jonathan Price was 43, according to the file Marcus had put together. Harvard-educated, 15 years of emergency medicine experience, published researcher. He was also apparently pissed off enough to potentially tank an entire program. They met in a small conference room. Dr. Price was younger than Daniel expected, with the kind of tired eyes that came from too many night shifts and the permanent tension in his shoulders that emergency physicians seemed to carry. Mr. Hayes, Dr. Price said, not offering to shake hands. I appreciate you coming, but I'm not sure what you think you're going to say that will change my mind. I'm not here to change your mind, Daniel said, sitting down. I'm here to listen. That seemed to catch Dr. Price off guard. Listen to what? To why you're angry, Daniel said. Because I don't think this is really about one false positive. We told you going in that the system would make mistakes, so something else is going on here. Dr. Price was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned back in his chair and laughed bitterly. You want to know what this is really about? It's about watching a 14-year-old kid suffer through an unnecessary spinal tap because I trusted a computer over my own clinical judgment. It's about his parents looking at me like I tortured their son for no reason. It's about realizing that I'm outsourcing my decision-making to an algorithm I don't actually understand. Tell me about the case, Daniel said quietly. Dr. Price pulled out a file. Marcus Chen, age 14, came in with severe headache, neck stiffness, fever. Classic meningitis presentation. Your system gave an 82% probability of bacterial infection. I ordered immediate treatment, spinal tap, IV antibiotics, the works. The tap was traumatic. Hit a blood vessel, took 3 tries to get clean fluid. The kid was screaming. And then the cultures came back negative for bacteria. It was viral. The antibiotics did nothing except make him sick. I'm sorry, Daniel said. Sorry doesn't help Marcus Chen, Dr. Price said harshly. Sorry doesn't undo the fact that I caused that kid unnecessary suffering because I relied on a system that was wrong. The system gave a probability, not a certainty, Daniel said carefully. 82% means there was an 18% chance it wasn't bacterial. I know how percentages work, Dr. Price snapped, but when a system tells me there's an 82% chance of bacterial meningitis, I have to treat it. If I don't and the kid dies from bacterial meningitis, that's on me. Your system forces me into a position where I'm damned either way. Daniel understood the anger now. This wasn't about the technology failing. It was about the impossible choices the technology created. You're right, Daniel said. And I don't have a good answer for that. Medicine is about making decisions with incomplete information, and Mediscan doesn't change that. It just gives you one more piece of information to factor in. A piece of information that was wrong. This time, Daniel acknowledged. But how many times has it been right? How many cases has it caught that you would have missed? Dr. Price pulled out another file. 6 cases in 2 months. 6 times the system flagged something that turned out to be accurate. And I'm grateful for those. But one mistake can kill someone, Mr. Hayes. One misdiagnosis or one unnecessary treatment that causes complications. The question is whether the benefit outweighs the risk. What would it take for you to believe it does? Daniel asked. Dr. Price considered the question. Transparency, he said finally. I want to understand how the algorithm makes its decisions. Not just it analyzes patterns, but actual detailed information about what factors it's weighing and why. If I'm going to trust it, I need to know how it thinks. That's fair, Daniel said. I can arrange for you to meet with our development team. They can walk you through the algorithm architecture and explain the decision trees. And I want changes to how the system presents information, Dr. Price continued. Right now, it gives a single probability percentage. That's not enough. I want to see the confidence intervals, the alternative diagnoses it considered, the factors that might skew the prediction. Give me the full picture, not just the headline number. Daniel nodded, taking notes. I can push for interface changes. It'll take time to implement, but it's a reasonable request. And I want a formal review process, Dr. Price said. Every false positive should be analyzed and fed back into the system. Not just logged, but actually used to improve the algorithm. We already do that, Daniel said, but we can make the process more transparent. Regular reports on how false positives are being addressed, what changes are being made based on them. Dr. Price studied him. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Some corporate salesman who would tell me I'm wrong and the system is perfect, Dr. Price said. Instead, you're sitting here agreeing with my concerns. Because you're right, Daniel said simply. The system isn't perfect. It's a tool, and like any tool, it can be misused or misunderstood. That's on us to fix, not on you to accept. Why are you doing this? Dr. Price asked. Not the job, but why do you care this much about making it work? Daniel hesitated. Then he pulled out his phone and showed Dr. Price a photo. Sarah, holding newborn Tommy in the hospital, her smile radiant and exhausted. My wife died from sepsis 8 months ago, Daniel said. Streptococcal infection, caught too late. The technology we're implementing now could have saved her life if it had existed then. So yeah, I care about making it work. Because every time the system catches an infection early, that's someone's wife or husband or kid who gets to go home. And every time it makes a mistake, that matters too. Because these aren't statistics, they're people. Dr. Price looked at the photo for a long moment. I'm sorry for your loss. Me too, Daniel said quietly. They talked for another hour, working through specific technical changes and establishing a direct communication line for when issues arose. By the time Daniel left, Dr. Price had agreed to hold off on going public while they implemented the improvements. On the drive back, Daniel called Ava. How did it go? She asked. He's not going to the media, Daniel said. But we need to make changes. Better transparency in how the algorithm makes decisions, more detailed interface information, formal review process for false positives. That's a lot of development work. It's necessary work, Daniel said. He's right, Ava. We've been so focused on proving the system works that we haven't been transparent enough about how it works. Doctors need to understand the decision-making process if they're going to trust it. There was silence on the line. Then Ava said, I'll talk to the development team. We'll make it happen. Thank you. Daniel, Ava said, her voice softer than usual. You did good work today. Not everyone could have turned that conversation around. I just listened, Daniel said. Exactly, Ava replied. When Daniel got home that night, it was past 10. He expected Tommy to be asleep, but instead found his son sitting at the kitchen table with Mrs. Chen, working on homework. Dad! Tommy jumped up and ran to him. What are you doing up? Daniel asked, hugging him. I couldn't sleep until you got home, Tommy admitted. Mrs. Chen said I could stay up if I did my homework. Mrs. Chen smiled apologetically. He was worried. I'm here now, Daniel said, kneeling down to Tommy's level. And I'm fine. Just a long day. Did you help people? Tommy asked. Daniel thought about Dr. Price, about the conversation that could have destroyed everything, but instead became a path forward. Yeah, he said. I think I did. Over the next month, the changes Dr. Price had requested were implemented. The development team rebuilt the interface to show confidence intervals and alternative diagnoses. The algorithm became more transparent, displaying the key factors influencing each prediction. A formal review board was established to analyze every false positive and feed improvements back into the system. It was exhausting work. Daniel spent his days bouncing between hospitals, his nights reviewing technical specifications and planning training sessions. He missed Tommy's school play because he was stuck in a meeting with the St. Vincent's IT department. He forgot his own birthday until Marcus brought him a cupcake with a candle stuck in it. But the system was getting better, more accurate, more trustworthy. And the list Daniel kept of lives saved was getting longer. Then came the call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday morning. Daniel was in his office reviewing deployment schedules when his phone rang. An unfamiliar number. This is Daniel Hayes, he answered. Mr. Hayes, this is Dr. Jennifer Walsh from Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. I need to talk to you about implementing Mediscan in a pediatric setting. Daniel sat up straight. I wasn't aware we were being considered for pediatric deployment. You weren't, Dr. Walsh said. But I just got off the phone with Patricia Okonkwo, and she convinced me to reconsider. We lose too many kids to infections that get caught too late, Mr. Hayes. If your system can help, I want it. Pediatric deployment comes with additional complexities, Daniel said carefully. The algorithm would need to be trained on pediatric-specific data. Children present differently than adults. I know, Dr. Walsh said, but Ava Sterling told me you're the person who can make complicated things work. So I'm asking, can you make this work? Daniel thought about Tommy, about all the other kids who could end up like Marcus Chen, or worse, about parents who could end up like him, broken and trying to hold their lives together in the aftermath of loss. Yes, he said. We can make it work. After hanging up, he immediately called Ava. We need to talk about pediatric deployment, he said. I know, Ava replied. I've been thinking about it too. It's the logical next step. It's also terrifying, Daniel admitted. The stakes are even higher with kids. Everything about this program is terrifying, Ava said, but that's not a reason not to do it. They scheduled a meeting for the following Monday to discuss the technical requirements and timeline. But as Daniel hung up, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness, exactly, but something close to hope. That evening, he picked Tommy up from school and took him out for pizza. They sat in a booth by the window, Tommy chattering about his day while Daniel listened and tried to be fully present. Dad? Tommy asked, reaching for another slice. Are you happy? It was the second time his son had asked that question. Daniel considered it more carefully this time. I'm getting there, he said honestly. It's not the same as before Mom died. I don't know if it ever will be. But I'm finding things that matter, and that helps. Like your job? Like my job, Daniel agreed. And like you. You matter most of all. Tommy smiled, and it was the first real, unguarded smile Daniel had seen from him in months. Maybe they were both getting there. The smile faded from Tommy's face as quickly as it had appeared when Daniel's phone rang again. It was almost 9 at night, and Daniel had promised no more work calls during dinner. but the name on the screen was Dr. Okonkwo, and she didn't call at night unless something was wrong. "I have to take this," Daniel said apologetically. Tommy's shoulders slumped, but he nodded and went back to picking at his pizza. "Patricia?" Daniel answered, stepping away from the table. "We have a situation," Dr. Okonkwo said without preamble. "Metascan flagged a patient an hour ago. 38-year-old woman came in with abdominal pain and low-grade fever. System is saying possible necrotizing fasciitis with 91% confidence." Daniel's blood went cold. Necrotizing fasciitis. Flesh-eating bacteria. One of the fastest-moving and deadliest infections known to medicine. "What does the attending think?" he asked. "That it's probably just appendicitis or maybe an ovarian cyst. The presentation isn't classic for necrotizing fasciitis. No obvious skin changes, no rapid progression. But the system is screaming at us, and I need to know if I should trust it." Daniel's mind raced. A 91% confidence level was high, but Dr. Price's case had been 82% and turned out wrong. If they treated aggressively for necrotizing fasciitis, and it wasn't, they'd be subjecting the patient to unnecessary surgery and antibiotics. But if it was, and they waited, the woman could be dead by morning. "What's your gut telling you?" Daniel asked. "My gut says the system might be right," Dr. Okonkwo admitted. "There's something off about the presentation. The pain pattern is weird, and her white blood cell count is higher than it should be for simple appendicitis. But I've been wrong before. What do you need from me?" "I need you to tell me if the system has ever been wrong at 91% confidence." Daniel pulled up the database on his phone, scrolling through case files with one hand. "Give me a second." He found what he was looking for. In 6 months of deployment across all pilot sites, we've had 43 cases flagged at 90% or higher confidence. 41 were accurate. 2 were false positives. So 5% chance it's wrong. About that. But Patricia, those 2 false positives were both cases where the patient had unusual presentations that mimicked bacterial infections. Viral conditions with inflammatory markers that looked bacterial to the algorithm. "This isn't viral," Dr. Okonkwo said. "I'd stake my license on that much." "Then trust the system," Daniel said, "and trust yourself. You said something feels off. The system is saying something's off. Maybe you're both right." There was a long pause. Then Dr. Okonkwo said, "I'm taking her to surgery. If this blows up in my face, I'm blaming you." "Fair enough," Daniel said. "Keep me updated." He hung up and returned to the table, where Tommy was building a structure out of pizza crusts. "Do you have to go?" Tommy asked quietly. "No," Daniel said, sitting back down. "Not tonight, but someone's sick, and the hospital needed advice about how to help them." "Is the person going to be okay?" "I hope so," Daniel said honestly. "We did everything we can to give them the best chance." They finished dinner in relative quiet, Tommy's earlier smile not returning. When they got home, Daniel helped with bedtime, reading another chapter about dinosaurs, even though his mind was elsewhere. After Tommy fell asleep, Daniel sat on the couch with his phone in his hand, waiting. The call came at 11:30. "It was necrotizing fasciitis," Dr. Okonkwo said. Her voice was tight. "Started in the abdominal wall, spreading fast. We caught it just in time. Another 6 hours and she would have been septic. Maybe 12 hours and she would have been dead." Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "How is she?" "In surgery now. They're debriding the infected tissue. It's going to be a long recovery, but she'll live." Dr. Okonkwo paused. "Your system saved her life, Daniel. If we'd waited for classic presentation or relied solely on clinical judgment, we would have missed it." "You made the call," Daniel said. "I just gave you information." "Don't downplay this," Dr. Okonkwo said sharply. "You built something that works. Own it." After hanging up, Daniel sat in the dark living room for a long time. He pulled out his list, the one he'd been keeping of lives saved, and added a new entry. Name unknown, 38 years old. Necrotizing fasciitis caught early. Expected to survive. The list was getting longer. That should have felt good. Instead, Daniel just felt tired. The pediatric deployment planning consumed the next 2 months. Dr. Walsh proved to be as demanding as she was passionate, pushing back on every technical specification and asking questions that forced the development team to rethink fundamental assumptions about how the algorithm processed pediatric data. Daniel found himself traveling to Philadelphia every other week, working with children's hospitals and pediatric specialists to understand how infection presentation differed in kids. It was harder than adult implementation, partly because the medical complexity was greater, but mostly because every case involved a child who reminded him of Tommy. One afternoon, Dr. Walsh took him on rounds in the pediatric ICU. They stopped at a bed where a 6-year-old girl lay connected to monitors and IV lines, her parents sitting vigil with hollow eyes that Daniel recognized from his own mirror. "Emma Rodriguez," Dr. Walsh said quietly. "Septic shock from streptococcal infection. We caught it, but barely. 6 more hours, and we would have lost her." Daniel stared at the little girl, at her parents, at the machines keeping her alive. "This is why we need Metascan in pediatrics," Dr. Walsh said. "Not because it's perfect, but because missing these cases is unacceptable." "What if the system makes a mistake?" Daniel asked. "What if we cause harm? What if we prevent it?" Dr. Walsh countered. "You can't let fear of failure stop you from trying to help." But fear was exactly what Daniel felt as the pediatric pilot program moved closer to reality. He found himself lying awake at night, imagining all the ways things could go wrong. A false positive leading to unnecessary procedures on a child. A false negative missing a critical infection. Parents trusting the system and losing their kids because the technology failed. Ava noticed his spiraling during one of their weekly meetings. They'd started having coffee together on Friday afternoons, ostensibly to review program metrics, but increasingly just to talk. "You're carrying too much," Ava said, setting down her cup. "I can see it." "I'm fine," Daniel lied. "You're not." Ava's voice was firm but not unkind. "You're taking personal responsibility for every case, every outcome, every decision a doctor makes based on our system. That's not sustainable." "How else am I supposed to do this?" Daniel asked. "These are people's lives." "And you're one person," Ava said. "You can't save everyone, Daniel. You can't even save most people. What you can do is build something that helps, but you have to accept that help isn't the same as perfect." "Is that what you tell yourself?" The words came out sharper than Daniel intended. "When you think about your sister," Ava's expression hardened, "every single day, I tell myself that I can't bring her back, but I can keep other people's sisters from dying the same way. It doesn't make the grief easier, it just makes it bearable." Daniel looked away. "I don't know if I can keep doing this." "Yes, you can," Ava said. "Because the alternative is walking away, and I don't think you're capable of that anymore. You've seen too much, saved too many people. You can't unknow that you have the ability to make a difference." She was right, and Daniel hated it. The St. Vincent's deployment hit a major crisis in week 3. The system integration had gone smoothly, the staff training had been comprehensive, and for the first 2 weeks, everything worked exactly as planned. Then a surgical patient died. The call came from Dr. Ross herself, her voice tight with controlled anger. "I need you here," she said. "Now." Daniel made the drive in record time, Marcus following in his own car. They met Dr. Ross in her office, where she had a case file spread across her desk. "Marcus Patterson," Dr. Ross said. "Age 49, postoperative day 2 following gallbladder removal. Routine surgery, no complications during the procedure. He developed a fever yesterday afternoon. Metascan flagged it as possible surgical site infection. Recommended monitoring. The surgical resident agreed. This morning, the patient went into septic shock. He died an hour ago." Daniel felt like he'd been punched. The system flagged him? "As low risk," Dr. Ross said. 38% probability of serious infection. The recommendation was monitoring, not intervention. So we monitored, and he died." Marcus was frantically pulling up logs on his laptop. "I need to see the data inputs. If the system missed something—" "The system didn't miss anything," Dr. Ross interrupted. "It made a prediction based on available data. The prediction was wrong. The question is whether we can trust it at all if it can't catch an infection that kills someone in 12 hours. Daniel forced himself to think through the panic. What do the autopsy findings show? Preliminary results suggest an aggressive staph infection at the surgical site. It spread faster than typical postoperative infections. No clear explanation for why. And the system's analysis was based on what data points? Dr. Ross pulled up the patient chart on her computer. Vitals, lab work, surgical notes, patient history, everything we had. Daniel scanned the information, his developer brain kicking in despite the grief. His white blood cell count was only slightly elevated. Fever was low grade. By conventional assessment, this looked like a minor post-surgical infection. Exactly, Dr. Ross said, which is why we followed the system's recommendation to monitor, but clearly something was happening that the algorithm didn't catch. Or the algorithm caught something but didn't weight it heavily enough, Marcus said, still typing furiously. I'm seeing the pattern recognition logs now. The system noted an unusual trend in his vital signs, heart rate increasing slightly over several hours, blood pressure trending down. Individually, none of the changes were significant, but the pattern together might have suggested early sepsis. Might have, Dr. Ross repeated. But it gave us 38% probability, not enough to trigger aggressive intervention. Daniel felt sick. This was the nightmare scenario. Not a false positive causing unnecessary treatment, but a false negative letting someone die. I need to review the complete case file, he said. Every data point, every decision, everything. We need to understand what went wrong so we can fix it. And in the meantime, well, Dr. Ross asked, I have a hospital full of post-surgical patients. Do I trust the system to monitor them or not? The question hung in the air. Daniel thought about Dr. Okonkwo's patient, saved by trusting a 91% prediction. He thought about all the cases where the system had been right. And he thought about Marcus Patterson, dead because the system had been wrong. Keep using it, Daniel said finally. But don't use it alone. The system should inform clinical judgment, not replace it. If something feels wrong, trust that feeling over what the algorithm says. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement, Dr. Ross said dryly. No, Daniel admitted, but it's honest. He spent the next week practically living at St. Vincent's, working with Marcus and the development team to analyze what had gone wrong. The truth was both simple and devastating. The algorithm had recognized the pattern of early sepsis, but it had weighted it too conservatively because the individual data points weren't significantly abnormal. The system was designed to avoid false positives, which meant it sometimes missed true positives. They pushed an update to adjust the weighting, making the algorithm more sensitive to subtle patterns. But it meant the false positive rate would increase, which would lead to more unnecessary interventions. There was no perfect answer, just trade-offs. Daniel found himself sitting in his car in the hospital parking lot late one night, too exhausted to drive home. His phone rang. Tommy's number. Dad? His son's voice was small. Mrs. Chen said you're not coming home again tonight. I'm sorry, buddy, Daniel said, his throat tight. I'm dealing with something important at work. You're always dealing with something important, Tommy said, and there was an edge to his voice that Daniel had never heard before. You're never here anymore. That's not fair, Daniel started, but Tommy interrupted. Mom used to say that too, that she had important work, and then she died and you said you'd always be here and now you're not. The words cut deeper than anything Daniel had felt in months. Tommy, I don't want you to die too, Tommy said, and he was crying now. But I don't want you to leave me either. I just want you to come home. Daniel closed his eyes. I'll be home in an hour, I promise. You always promise, Tommy said quietly, and hung up. Daniel sat in the car for another minute, then started the engine and drove home. When he got there, Mrs. Chen looked relieved but also concerned. He's in his room, she said. He's been upset all evening. Daniel found Tommy curled up in bed, clutching the stuffed elephant and not looking at him. Hey, Daniel said softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. You came home, Tommy said, still not turning around. I promised I would. You've broken promises before. Daniel thought about all the missed dinners, the late arrivals, the times he'd said he'd be home and then got pulled into another crisis. Tommy was right. He'd been breaking promises without even realizing it. You're right, Daniel said. I have, and I'm sorry. That got Tommy to turn around. You are? Yeah, I've been so focused on work that I forgot the most important job I have is being your dad, and I've been failing at that. You're trying to help people, Tommy said, but his voice was uncertain. I am, Daniel agreed, but I'm also using work to avoid dealing with losing your mom. Because when I'm working, I don't have to think about how much I miss her. I don't have to feel all the things that hurt, but that's not fair to you. Tommy was quiet for a long moment. Do you still miss her? Every day, Daniel said honestly. Every single day. Me too, Tommy whispered. And I miss you too, even though you're not dead. You're just always gone. The words broke something in Daniel. He pulled Tommy into a hug, and they both cried, really cried, for the first time since Sarah's funeral. I'm gonna do better, Daniel promised when they could both breathe again. I can't promise I won't have to work sometimes, but I promise I'll be here more, really here, not just physically present while my mind is somewhere else. Okay, Tommy said. Can we do something this weekend? Just us? Absolutely. What do you want to do? Can we go camping, like we used to with Mom? Daniel's chest tightened. They hadn't been camping since Sarah died. The last trip had been just 3 months before she got sick, a weekend in the mountains where they'd made s'mores and Tommy had caught his first fish. Yeah, Daniel said, we can do that. The next morning, Daniel called Ava from his home office while Tommy ate breakfast. I need to cut back my hours, he said without preamble. There was a pause. What happened? My son told me I'm never home. He's right. I've been using work to run from grief, and it's hurting him. Okay, Ava said simply. What do you need? Fewer hospital visits, more remote work, someone else to handle some of the implementation oversight. I need to be home for dinner more than 3 nights a week. I'll have Marcus take on more of the site visits, Ava said. And I can hire another clinical integration specialist to share the load. But Daniel, you need to know something. The pediatric deployment is moving forward. Dr. Walsh is pushing for a January launch. That's going to require significant time investment from you. I know, Daniel said, and I'll give it what I can, but Tommy comes first. He has to come first. He should come first, Ava agreed. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. After hanging up, Daniel made breakfast with Tommy. They ate together at the kitchen table, actually talking instead of both being lost in their own heads. It was such a small thing, but it felt monumental. That weekend, they went camping. Daniel borrowed gear from a neighbor and drove them 2 hours into the mountains to a campground Sarah had loved. They hiked, badly assembled a tent that kept collapsing, burned hot dogs over a fire, and stayed up late looking at stars. Dad? Tommy said, lying in his sleeping bag next to Daniel's. Yeah? I'm glad you came home. Me too, buddy. Me too. The stars wheeled overhead, and for the first time in months, Daniel felt something close to peace. But peace didn't last. It never did. The call came on a Tuesday morning 2 weeks later. Daniel was actually at breakfast with Tommy, keeping his promise to be more present, when his phone rang. Dr. Walsh's number. I need you in Philadelphia, she said. Her voice was shaking. Now. What happened? We had our first Mediscan pediatric deployment yesterday at Children's Hospital. A 7-year-old boy came in overnight with stomach pain and fever. The system flagged him for possible appendicitis. We took him to surgery. Her voice broke. It wasn't appendicitis. It was mesenteric lymphadenitis, a viral condition that mimics appendicitis but doesn't require surgery. We did an unnecessary procedure on a 7-year-old because the system was wrong. Daniel's world tilted. How is he? Physically, he'll be fine. Emotionally, he's traumatized, and his parents are threatening to sue. But that's not even the worst part, Daniel. The worst part is that I convinced the board to implement this system by promising it would keep kids safe. And the first case we run through it, we harm a child. I'm on my way, Daniel said. Tommy looked up from his cereal. You have to go? Daniel looked at his son, then at his phone, then back at Tommy. This was the choice, wasn't it? The impossible balance between the work that saved lives and the life that needed him most. I have to go, Daniel said quietly. A kid got hurt, and I need to help fix it. But I'll be back tonight. I promise. You better be, Tommy said, but there was understanding in his eyes that shouldn't have been there for a 7-year-old. The drive to Philadelphia was the longest 4 hours of Daniel's life. Marcus met him at the hospital, looking almost as shaken as Daniel felt. The parents want to talk to you, Marcus said. Dr. Walsh convinced them to meet before they call their lawyer. Daniel found them in a private consultation room. The father was around Daniel's age, the mother younger, both of them radiating fury and fear in equal measure. Their son sat between them, pale and quiet, with a bandage visible under his shirt. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, Daniel said, sitting down across from them. I'm Daniel Hayes. I'm responsible for the Mediscan system. Then you're responsible for what happened to our son, Mr. Chen said. His voice was controlled, but barely. You're right, Daniel said. I am, and I'm sorry. That seemed to catch them off guard. Mrs. Chen's eyes narrowed. Sorry doesn't undo surgery. Sorry doesn't take away what our son went through. No, it doesn't, Daniel agreed. Nothing I say can do that. But I can tell you what happened and what we're going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again. He spent the next hour walking them through the case, explaining how the algorithm had analyzed their son's symptoms and why it had recommended surgery. He didn't make excuses or hide behind technical jargon. He just told them the truth. The system made a mistake, Daniel said. It saw a pattern that looked like appendicitis and weighted it too heavily. We're already adjusting the algorithm to be more conservative with pediatric cases, but that means we'll miss some real cases of appendicitis. There's no perfect answer. Then why use it at all? Mr. Chen demanded. Daniel pulled out his phone and showed them the list he kept. Names, ages, diagnoses, lives saved. Because when it works, it saves kids who would otherwise die, he said quietly. I'm not asking you to forgive what happened to your son, but I am asking you to understand that we're trying to help more kids than we hurt. Mrs. Chen was crying now. He's 7 years old. He didn't understand why we let them cut him open for no reason. I know, Daniel said. His voice was rough. I have a 7-year-old too, and if someone hurt him the way we hurt your son, I'd want to burn the whole system down. You have every right to be angry. They talked for another hour. In the end, the Chens agreed to hold off on legal action while Daniel and his team investigated the case fully. But the damage was done. The pediatric pilot program was now under scrutiny, and Dr. Walsh was facing serious questions from her hospital board. Daniel spent 3 days in Philadelphia, working with Dr. Walsh and her team to review every line of code, every data input, every decision point in the algorithm. They found the problem. The system had been trained primarily on adult data, and the pediatric adaptation hadn't adequately accounted for how differently children presented with abdominal pain. It was fixable, but it would take time. On the drive home, Daniel called Ava. We need to pause the pediatric rollout, he said. For how long? However long it takes to get it right. I'm not putting another kid through unnecessary surgery because we rushed the deployment. Ava was quiet for a moment. The board isn't going to like that. We've already invested significant resources in pediatric development. I don't care what the board likes, Daniel said, and he was surprised by the steel in his own voice. We got into this to save lives, not to hit deployment targets. If we can't do it safely, we don't do it at all. All right, Ava said. I'll handle the board. You handle making sure we get it right. When Daniel got home that night, exhausted and emotionally drained, Tommy was waiting up for him again. But this time there was no anger in his eyes, just concern. You look sad, Tommy observed. I am sad, Daniel admitted, sitting down next to him on the couch. A little boy got hurt today because of something I built, and I don't know how to make it better. Did you try to help him? Yeah, but trying isn't always enough. Tommy thought about that. Mom used to say that sometimes trying is all you can do, and that counts for something. Daniel pulled his son close, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on him. The case is saved, the case is lost. The impossible balance between work and family, between innovation and caution, between saving the world and being present for the one person who needed him most. Yeah, he said quietly. Sometimes trying is all you can do. They sat together in the quiet of the living room until Tommy started falling asleep against Daniel's shoulder. After carrying his son to bed and tucking him in, Daniel found himself standing in the doorway, watching the rise and fall of Tommy's breathing. Sarah used to do the same thing, standing vigil over their sleeping child like she was guarding something precious against the dark. The next 6 months were the hardest of Daniel's life, and that was saying something considering he'd already lived through losing his wife. The pediatric program stayed paused while the development team completely rebuilt the algorithm's pediatric components. Daniel insisted on triple-checking every change, every dataset, every decision tree. It made progress glacially slow, and the board was getting impatient, but he refused to rush. Meanwhile, the adult deployments continued expanding. 15 hospitals now used Mediscan, with dozens more in various stages of implementation planning. The success stories were real and growing. A construction worker in Denver, alive because the system caught his infection 18 hours before conventional diagnosis. A college student in Austin who kept her kidneys because treatment started early enough. A grandmother in Seattle who got to meet her newest grandchild because sepsis was identified in time. But there were failures too. Not many, but enough to remind Daniel that the system wasn't perfect. A patient in Miami whose unusual presentation completely fooled the algorithm. Another in Boston where a technical glitch meant the alert never reached the attending physician until it was too late. Daniel kept adding to his list. Both sides of it. Lives saved, lives lost. Both mattered. Dr. Okonkwo called him one evening in late spring with news that should have been good, but felt complicated. "We just hit our 6-month mark with Mediscan," she said. "I compiled the data for the hospital board. We've seen a 23% reduction in infection-related mortality compared to the same period last year. That's 68 patients who walked out of this hospital alive when they statistically shouldn't have." "That's incredible," Daniel said. "It is," Dr. Okonkwo agreed, "but I also had to report 3 cases where the system was wrong in ways that caused harm. 2 unnecessary surgeries and 1 case where we delayed treatment because the system gave us false reassurance." "How did the board react?" "Mixed. Half of them think Mediscan is the future of medicine. The other half think we're playing Russian roulette with patient safety." She paused. "For what it's worth, I'm in the first camp. The numbers don't lie. More people are alive because of this technology than are harmed by it, but that doesn't make the failures easier to accept." "No," Daniel said quietly. "It doesn't." After hanging up, he found Tommy in the backyard, throwing a tennis ball against the fence and catching it. It was something Sarah used to do when she was working through a problem, and seeing Tommy do it now made Daniel's chest tight. "Hey, buddy," Daniel said, sitting on the back steps. "How was school?" "Fine." Tommy threw the ball harder. "We had to write about what our parents do for work. I didn't know what to write about you." "What did you end up saying?" "That you help hospitals save people." Tommy caught the ball and held it. "Is that right?" "Yeah," Daniel said. That's right. But you can't save everyone." It wasn't a question. Tommy said it like a fact he'd learned the hard way. "No," Daniel admitted. "I can't. Nobody can." "Mom couldn't save herself," Tommy said, still not looking at him. "Even though she was smart and knew about medicine." Daniel's throat tightened. "No, she couldn't. Sometimes being smart isn't enough." Tommy finally turned around. His face was serious in a way that reminded Daniel painfully of Sarah. "Do you think what you're doing would have saved her?" It was the question Daniel had been avoiding for months. He danced around it, justified the work in other terms, told himself it was about helping people generally. But Tommy had cut straight to the heart of it. "Probably," Daniel said, honestly. "If the system had existed when she got sick, there's a good chance it would have flagged her infection early enough for treatment to work." "Then I'm glad you're doing it," Tommy said. "Even if it means you're gone sometimes. Because other kids shouldn't lose their moms like I did." Daniel stood up and crossed the yard, pulling his son into a hug. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise," Tommy said, his voice muffled against Daniel's chest. "You just didn't notice because you were sad." Out of the mouths of 7-year-olds, Daniel thought. The breakthrough on the pediatric algorithm came in June. The development team had partnered with 3 children's hospitals to gather comprehensive pediatric-specific data, training the system to recognize how differently children presented with various infections. The new version was more conservative, flagging cases as uncertain rather than making confident predictions when the data was ambiguous. Dr. Walsh agreed to run a small pilot with strict oversight protocols. Every case would be reviewed by multiple physicians, every algorithm recommendation would be questioned, and Daniel would be on call 24 hours a day for the first month. The first pediatric case flagged under the new system was a 9-year-old girl with a headache and stiff neck. The algorithm gave a 67% probability of bacterial meningitis, clearly marked as uncertain and recommending additional testing before aggressive intervention. The test confirmed bacterial meningitis. Treatment started within 4 hours of admission. The girl went home a week later with no complications. Daniel added her name to the list, his hands shaking slightly as he typed. But it was the second case that really proved the system worked. A 5-year-old boy came in with abdominal pain. The algorithm flagged multiple possible diagnoses, listing appendicitis at 41%, viral gastroenteritis at 38%, and mesenteric lymphadenitis at 12%. Instead of recommending immediate surgery, it suggested observation and sequential testing to narrow the diagnosis. Turned out to be viral gastroenteritis. The boy went home the same day with instructions for hydration and rest. No surgery, no trauma, just good medicine supported by good technology. Dr. Walsh called Daniel after that case. "It's working," she said, and there was wonder in her voice. "The system is actually making us better doctors, not replacing our judgment, but enhancing it." "That was always the goal," Daniel said. "I know. But there's the difference between the goal and the reality. This is real, Daniel. This is going to change how we practice pediatric medicine." 3 months later, the pediatric pilot had expanded to 7 children's hospitals. The data was promising. Not perfect, but promising. Infection detection rates were up, mortality was down, and the false positive rate had dropped to 4%. Daniel presented the results at a medical conference in September, standing in front of 300 physicians and trying not to throw up from nerves. He'd never been comfortable with public speaking, but Ava had insisted he be the one to present. "These aren't my results," he'd argued. "Yes, they are," Ava had said firmly. "You built this. You fixed it when it broke. You advocated for the patients when the board wanted to rush. Tell them that story." So he did. He stood on that stage and talked about Sarah, about losing her to an infection that might have been caught if the technology had existed. He talked about the Chen boy who'd had unnecessary surgery and how that failure had made them rebuild the algorithm from scratch. He talked about the children who were alive now because the system worked, and the ones who'd been spared unnecessary procedures because the system knew when to be uncertain. He showed them his list, both sides of it. When he finished, the room was quiet. Then a physician in the front row stood up. "I lost my daughter to sepsis 3 years ago," she said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were wet. "She was 12. If this technology had existed then, she might still be alive. So thank you for building it, and thank you for being honest about its limitations. We need both." The applause that followed was the most uncomfortable moment of Daniel's life. He didn't feel like he deserved it. He felt like someone who'd stumbled into doing the right thing more by accident than design. But Ava was waiting backstage with an expression that might have been pride. "That was good," she said simply. "That was terrifying," Daniel corrected. "Both things can be true." She handed him a bottle of water. "The board wants to expand to 50 hospitals by end of year. Can we do it?" Daniel thought about Tommy, about the promises he'd made to be more present. He thought about the nights he still lay awake worrying about cases, about patients, about all the ways the system could fail. "Not if I'm doing it alone," he said. "You're not alone," Ava said. "Marcus is ready to take on more responsibility, and I've approved hiring 2 more clinical integration specialists. You've built something that works, Daniel. Now let other people help you run it." It was good advice. Daniel was terrible at following it. The expansion to 50 hospitals happened over 4 months, and it was chaos. Training sessions, technical implementations, staff resistance, board negotiations. Daniel worked himself into exhaustion more than once, despite his promises to Tommy about being more present. But he also got better at delegating. Marcus proved to be a natural leader, handling hospital visits with the kind of enthusiasm that made people trust him. The new hires, Dr. Sarah Kim and James Peterson, brought their own expertise and took pressure off Daniel's shoulders. And slowly, incrementally, Daniel started to find something that looked like balance. He made it to Tommy's school concert in November, watching his son sing in the chorus and feeling his heart swell with an emotion that wasn't quite happiness but was close. He took weekends off, actual weekends where he didn't check email or answer calls unless it was an emergency. He and Tommy started a tradition of Saturday morning pancakes, continuing what Sarah had started. The grief didn't disappear. Some mornings Daniel still woke up reaching for Sarah's side of the bed, still forgot for a split second that she was gone. Tommy still had nightmares sometimes, still asked questions about his mother that broke Daniel's heart, but they were learning to carry it together. The weight didn't get lighter, but they got stronger. It was Ava who noticed the shift. They were having one of their Friday afternoon coffee meetings in December, reviewing year-end metrics, when she set down her tablet and just looked at him. "What?" Daniel asked. "You're different," she said. "Less frantic, more centered." "I'm not sure that's true." "It is," Ava insisted. "When you first started this job, you were using it to run from grief. Now you're using it to build something. That's different." Daniel thought about that. When did you make that shift with your sister? Ava was quiet for a moment. I'm not sure I have yet. Maybe that's why I see it in you, because I want to believe it's possible. It is, Daniel said. I think. I'm still figuring it out. But Tommy's happier, and I'm sleeping better. That has to count for something. It counts for a lot, Ava said softly. There was something in her voice that made Daniel look at her more carefully. They'd been working together for over a year now, having these weekly meetings, talking about more than just work. He told her things about Sarah and Tommy that he hadn't told anyone else. She'd shared pieces of her own grief about her sister. Somewhere along the way, without either of them noticing, they'd become friends. Or maybe something more than friends. Daniel wasn't sure. The thought terrified him. Can I ask you something? He said before he could overthink it. Always. Why did you really hire me? Not the official reason about having the right story. The real reason. Ava smiled slightly. You want the real reason? Because when you walked into my office that first day, you looked like someone who had nothing left to lose. And people with nothing left to lose are either dangerous or powerful. I gambled that you'd be powerful. She paused. I was right. I didn't feel powerful. I felt broken. Same thing sometimes, Ava said. Broken people either stay broken or they rebuild themselves into something stronger. You chose to rebuild. I had help, Daniel said, looking at her. So did I, Ava said quietly. The moment stretched between them, filled with things neither of them was quite ready to say. Daniel's phone rang, breaking the spell. Tommy's school. Mr. Hayes, this is Principal Morrison. Tommy's fine, but there was an incident at lunch. Could you come pick him up? Daniel was at the school in 15 minutes. He found Tommy sitting in the principal's office, his knuckles scraped and his expression defiant. What happened? Daniel asked. There was a fight, Principal Morrison said. Tommy and another student, Alex Chen. According to witnesses, Alex said something about Tommy's mother, and Tommy punched him. Daniel's protective instincts flared. What did Alex say? That doesn't excuse violence, Mr. Hayes. I didn't ask if it excused it. I asked what he said. Tommy spoke up, his voice tight. He said at least his mom wasn't stupid enough to die from the flu. Daniel's vision went red for a second. He forced himself to breathe, to think, to not make this worse by doing what every instinct told him to do. I understand Tommy needs consequences for hitting another student, Daniel said carefully. But I also need you to address what that other kid said. We'll be speaking with Alex's parents as well, Principal Morrison assured him. On the drive home, Tommy sat in rigid silence. Daniel pulled into a parking lot and turned off the car. Want to talk about it? He asked. No? Okay. But I need to say something. What Alex said was cruel and wrong, and I'm proud of you for defending your mom's memory, but hitting people isn't the answer. You wanted to hit him, Tommy said. I saw your face. Daniel couldn't lie. Yeah, I did. But wanting to do something and actually doing it are different things. Part of being strong is knowing when to walk away. I'm tired of being strong, Tommy said, and his voice broke. I'm tired of people asking about Mom and then getting weird when I tell them she's dead. I'm tired of pretending I'm okay when I'm not. I just want to be a normal kid with a normal family. Daniel unbuckled his seatbelt and pulled Tommy into an awkward hug across the center console. I know, I'm tired too, but we're doing the best we can, and that's enough. They sat there in this parking lot for a long time, just holding each other and letting the hurt exist without trying to fix it. That night, after Tommy was asleep, Daniel found himself pulling out the photo albums Sarah had meticulously maintained, pictures of their life together, their wedding, Tommy's birth, random Sundays and holiday dinners and moments that had seemed ordinary at the time but were precious now. He found one of Sarah in the lab at Mediscan, back when they were both young and idealistic and thought they could change the world. She was laughing at something, her whole face lit up with joy. We did it, Daniel said quietly to the photo. It took 8 years and you're not here to see it, but we did it. The system works. We're saving people. The photo didn't answer, of course, but Daniel felt something shift inside him anyway. For the first time since Sarah died, he could think about her without the grief immediately crushing him. He could remember her laugh, her passion, her belief that technology could make a difference, and feel grateful instead of just devastated. The grief was still there. It would always be there. But it wasn't the only thing anymore. New Year's Eve found Daniel and Tommy at Ava's house for a small gathering. It had started as a casual invitation that Daniel had almost declined, but Tommy had asked if they could go, and Daniel couldn't think of a good reason to say no. Ava's house was smaller than Daniel expected for a CEO, a cozy townhouse filled with books and comfortable furniture. Marcus was there with his girlfriend, along with Dr. Okonkwo and her husband, and a few other people from Sterling Medical Technologies. It felt strange to be at a party. Daniel hadn't been to one since before Sarah died, but Tommy was laughing with Marcus about something, and Dr. Okonkwo was telling a story that had everyone chuckling, and it felt almost normal. Ava found him on the back patio around 11, looking at the city lights. "You okay?" she asked, handing him a glass of wine. "Yeah," Daniel said, surprised to realize it was true. "I think I am." "It's been quite a year." That's an understatement. Daniel took a sip of wine. "A year ago, I thought my life was over. Now I'm standing here with a job I never imagined having, working on technology that's actually making a difference, and my son is inside laughing with people who care about us." "Sarah would be proud," Ava said softly. "You didn't know her." "I know what she believed in. Marcus showed me some of her old research notes when we were developing the pediatric algorithm. She wrote this thing in the margins about how technology should serve humanity, not replace it. That every algorithm should remember it's dealing with people's lives, not just data points." Ava smiled. "That's what you've built. Not just a system that works, but one that remembers the people behind the data." Daniel felt his eyes getting wet. "Thank you for giving me the chance to build it." "Thank you for not running away when it got hard," Ava countered. "Most people would have." Inside, someone started counting down to midnight. Tommy appeared in the doorway, beckoning Daniel to come in. "Come on, Dad, it's almost time." Daniel and Ava went back inside, joining the circle of people counting down the final seconds of the year. When midnight struck and everyone cheered, Tommy hugged Daniel tight. "Happy New Year, Dad." "Happy New Year, buddy." Ava was standing nearby, and on impulse, Daniel hugged her too. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything." "We're just getting started," Ava said, and there was something in her eyes that suggested she meant more than just the work. The next 6 months validated everything they'd been building. The 50-hospital deployment was completed by March, with overwhelmingly positive results. The pediatric program expanded to 20 children's hospitals. The FDA approved Mediscan for broader use, and insurance companies started covering the implementation costs. The media picked up the story. Daniel found himself doing interviews he was terrible at, stumbling through questions about innovation and technology while trying to steer the conversation back to the patients whose lives had been saved. One interview with a national health magazine asked him about the personal cost of the work. "You lost your wife to an infection this system might have prevented," the journalist said. "How do you reconcile that?" Daniel had thought about this question a lot. "I don't know if I do reconcile it," he said honestly. "Sarah's gone, and nothing I build will bring her back, but I can honor what she believed in. She thought technology could serve people, could make medicine better without making it less human. That's what we're trying to do. Some days it feels like enough. Some days it doesn't. But it's what I can do, so I do it." The article came out in May, with a photo of Daniel and Tommy that made them both look more heroic than they felt. Tommy was embarrassed by it, but he also cut out the article and put it in his room. "Why'd you keep it?" Daniel asked. "Because Mom would have been proud," Tommy said simply. In June, on the anniversary of Sarah's death, Daniel and Tommy drove to the cemetery. It was the first time Tommy had wanted to visit since the funeral, and Daniel's hands shook as he parked the car. They sat by Sarah's grave for a long time, not saying much. Tommy brought flowers, white roses that had been Sarah's favorite. Daniel brought a letter he'd written but couldn't quite bring himself to read out loud. "I miss her," Tommy said eventually. "Me too." "But I'm okay now," Tommy added. "Most of the time. Are you okay?" Daniel thought about the question. Was he okay? He still had days where the grief hit like a physical blow. He still dreamed about Sarah sometimes and woke up crying, but he also had days where he laughed, where he felt proud of his work, where he could imagine a future that didn't look like just surviving. "Yeah," he said. "I think I am." "Good," Tommy said, "because I need you to be okay."
I need you to be okay too, Daniel said, pulling his son close.
They sat there until the sun started setting, talking to Sarah about everything that had happened, all the ways their lives had changed, all the things she'd missed. Before they left, Tommy placed the roses on the grave and said quietly, "We're doing okay, Mom. I think you'd be happy about that." Daniel thought Sarah would be happy about more than that. She'd be happy about the technology they'd built, the lives they'd saved, the way Daniel and Tommy had found their way back to something like peace. That night, after Tommy was asleep, Daniel finally opened the letter he'd written and read it out loud to the empty living room. "Dear Sarah, it's been a year, the worst year of my life, and also, somehow, a year where I found purpose again. The Mediscan system you believed in is working. We've saved hundreds of lives, maybe thousands if the projections are right. Every time the system catches an infection early, I think about you. About how you'd be analyzing the data, finding ways to make it better, pushing everyone to remember that algorithms serve people, not the other way around. Tommy's doing better. He misses you every day, but he's laughing again. He's making friends. He's learning that life can still be good even when it's different than what we planned. I'm doing better too. I found work that matters. I found people who care about us. I found a way to turn the worst thing that ever happened to me into something that helps other families avoid the same loss. It doesn't make losing you easier. Nothing could do that. But it makes the grief bearable. I hope you're proud of us. I hope wherever you are, you can see that we didn't just survive. We're actually living again. I love you. I'll always love you. But I'm learning that loving you and moving forward aren't mutually exclusive. You'd want us to move forward. So that's what we're doing." Daniel folded the letter and put it in the album with Sarah's photos. Then he poured himself a glass of water and stood at the window, looking out at the quiet street. His phone buzzed, a text from Ava. "Coffee tomorrow? I have something I want to talk to you about." Daniel smiled and typed back, "Sounds good. What's it about?" "Tell you tomorrow, but I think you're going to like it." The next morning, Daniel met Ava at their usual coffee shop. She was already there, 2 cups on the table, and an expression that suggested whatever she wanted to talk about was significant. "Okay," Daniel said, sitting down. "What's the big news?" Ava slid a folder across the table. "The board approved a new division, Global Clinical Integration. We're expanding Mediscan to Europe, starting with the UK and Germany. We need someone to lead it." Daniel opened the folder and saw his name at the top of the organizational chart. "You want me to run international expansion?" "I want you to build what we built here, but on a global scale," Ava said. "You've proven the model works. Now, let's take it to the rest of the world." Daniel's first instinct was panic. International travel, massive responsibility, impossible pressure. But then he thought about the list he kept of lives saved, and how that list could grow exponentially if they did this right. "I'll need a team," he said. "I can't do this alone." "You'll have whatever resources you need," Ava promised. "Marcus can run domestic operations. Sarah Kim and James Peterson can support him. You'd focus on international deployment, but you'd also have autonomy to structure it however works best." "What about Tommy? I can't be traveling internationally constantly." "Then don't," Ava said simply. "Set it up so you're not required to be on site for every deployment. Use technology to manage remotely. Build local teams in each country. The whole point of this division is to scale what works, and what works is your leadership, not your physical presence at every hospital." Daniel looked at the organizational chart, at his name at the top, at the scope of what they were proposing. It was terrifying and exciting and completely overwhelming. "Can I think about it?" he asked. "Of course. But Daniel..." Ava leaned forward. "Sarah built the foundation for this technology because she believed it could change medicine. You've spent the last year proving she was right. Now we have a chance to change medicine globally. Don't let fear keep you from seeing how extraordinary that is." Daniel met her eyes and saw belief there, not just in the technology, but in him. "Okay," he said. "I'll do it." Ava's smile was genuine and warm. "I was hoping you'd say that." They spent the next hour going over logistics and timelines. The UK deployment would start in September, giving Daniel 4 months to prepare. He'd need to hire local clinical integration specialists, establish relationships with NHS hospitals, navigate completely different regulatory environments. It was a massive undertaking, but for the first time in his life, Daniel felt ready for massive. That evening, he told Tommy about the new role over dinner. "Does this mean you'll be gone more?" Tommy asked, and there was worry in his voice. "It means I'll be traveling sometimes," Daniel admitted. "Maybe a week every few months, but I'm structuring it so I can be home most of the time. And when I do travel, I was thinking maybe sometimes you could come with me, see new countries, meet new people." Tommy's eyes widened. "Really? Really? I'm not doing this job at the expense of being your dad anymore. We'll figure it out together." "Okay," Tommy said, and then more firmly, "Okay, I think Mom would want you to do this." "I think so too." Over the next 4 months, Daniel threw himself into building the international division. He hired a team of brilliant, dedicated people who believed in the mission. He established partnerships with hospitals in London, Manchester, and Berlin. He navigated bureaucratic nightmares and cultural differences and moments of total panic where he was sure everything would fall apart. But it didn't fall apart. It came together. The UK launch in September was smoother than the first US deployments had been, partly because they'd learned from their mistakes, and partly because the reputation of the technology had preceded them. British physicians were cautiously optimistic, willing to try something that had proven results. Daniel brought Tommy with him for the launch week. They stayed in a hotel in London, and in between meetings and training sessions, Daniel took his son to see Big Ben and the Tower of London and all the tourist spots Sarah had always wanted to visit. "I wish Mom could see this," Tommy said one evening as they walked along the Thames. "Me too," Daniel said. "But in a way, she is seeing it. Everything we're doing, it's because of what she started. She's part of this." Tommy thought about that. "I think I'm starting to understand what you mean when you say we're turning sad things into good things." "Yeah?" Daniel asked. "Yeah. Mom died, and that's the saddest thing ever. But because of that, you're helping lots of people not die. So the sad thing made a good thing possible." Tommy paused. "It doesn't make me less sad about Mom, but it makes me proud of you." Daniel had to stop walking because his eyes were too blurry to see where he was going. He knelt down and hugged his son right there on the street, not caring who was watching. "I'm proud of you too," he managed to say. "So proud." The UK deployment was successful. Within 3 months, infection mortality rates at the pilot hospitals dropped by 18%. The German launch followed in January with similar results. By the end of the second year, Mediscan was deployed in over 200 hospitals across 5 countries. The documented lives saved numbered in the thousands. The technology Daniel and Sarah had dreamed about in a small startup office 8 years ago was now changing medicine on a global scale. But the numbers weren't what mattered most to Daniel anymore. What mattered was Tommy, thriving in 3rd grade and talking about maybe wanting to be a doctor someday. What mattered was the team he'd built, people who believed in the mission and pushed each other to do better. What mattered was Ava, who'd become not just a colleague, but a genuine friend, someone who understood both his grief and his hope. One evening in late February, 2 years after that first meeting in Ava's office, Daniel found himself back in the same room. But this time it wasn't a summons, it was a celebration. The board had just approved a major expansion, tripling their budget and their reach. Ava had opened champagne, and they were sitting on the couch in her office rather than across the desk. "To Sarah," Ava said, raising her glass. "Who started all of this?" "To Sarah," Daniel echoed. They drank in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Ava said, "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Are you happy?" It was the same question Tommy had asked him twice, the question Daniel had struggled to answer. But now, sitting in this office where his life had changed direction, thinking about all the impossible things that had become possible, he knew the answer. "Yeah," he said. "I am. It's different than the happiness I had with Sarah, but it's real." "Good," Ava said softly. "You deserve that." "So do you," Daniel said, looking at her. "Have you found it? Happiness?" Ava smiled, and there was something vulnerable in her expression. "I'm getting there, building this with you, watching it work. Knowing my sister's death led to something that saves other sisters, that helps. And having someone who understands, who carries the same kind of grief." She trailed off. "Yeah," Daniel said quietly. "That helps." They sat there as the city lights came on outside. 2 people who'd lost everything and somehow found a way to build something new from the ruins.
3 years after Sarah's death, Daniel stood in a conference room in Geneva, addressing the World Health Organization about implementing Mediscan in developing countries. It was the culmination of years of work, the moment when the technology truly became global. Tommy was with him, now 10 years old and surprisingly poised as he sat in the audience. Ava was there too, ready to present the technical specifications. As Daniel talked about early infection detection and mortality reduction and all the clinical outcomes, he thought about the journey that had led here. The grief, the failure, the small victories, the devastating losses, the gradual rebuilding of a life that had shattered. He thought about Sarah, about how she'd believed technology could serve humanity, about how she'd never lived to see it happen but had made it possible anyway. He thought about Tommy, who'd lost his mother but gained the knowledge that loss could be transformed into purpose. He thought about Ava, who'd taken a chance on a broken man and helped him become whole. After the presentation, as the WHO representatives asked questions and discussed implementation strategies, Daniel stepped outside for air. Tommy followed him. "That was really good, Dad," Tommy said. "Thanks, buddy. Do you think we're done now? Like, is this the end of what you needed to build?" Daniel considered the question. "I don't think we're ever done. There's always more people to help, more ways to improve the technology, more lives to save. But we've built something real, something that lasts. So in that way, yeah, I think we did what we set out to do." "Mom would be really proud," Tommy said, and there was certainty in his voice. "I think so too." They stood together looking out at the Swiss mountains, father and son, both of them forever changed by loss, but no longer defined by it. That evening, Daniel, Tommy, and Ava had dinner at a small restaurant overlooking the lake. The conversation was easy, full of laughter and stories and plans for the future. At some point, Ava's hand found Daniel's under the table, and he didn't pull away. Tommy noticed and smiled, but didn't say anything. He'd learned that some moments didn't need words. Later, after Tommy was asleep in the hotel room, Daniel sat on the balcony with a cup of tea and called up his list on his phone. The list of lives saved had grown long, hundreds of names and ages and diagnoses, people who were alive because of technology he'd helped create. At the bottom, he added one more entry. Daniel Hayes, age 35, saved by learning that grief and purpose can coexist. That loss doesn't have to mean the end, that sometimes trying is enough. He thought about deleting it, but decided to leave it, because it was true. He had been saved. Not from grief, but from being consumed by it. Not from loss, but from letting it destroy what remained. Sarah was gone. That truth would never change, would never stop hurting. But Daniel was still here. Tommy was still here. And the work they were doing mattered. The past didn't disappear. Sarah's absence was still a weight Daniel carried every day, but it no longer crushed him. He'd learned to carry it alongside hope, alongside purpose, alongside the tentative possibility of new love. They hadn't just survived. They'd truly lived again. And in the end, that was the only victory that mattered.